Today, Japan is known for bullet trains that race across the countryside, towering skylines filled with cutting-edge technology, and companies whose innovations have shaped the modern world. It is one of the world's largest economies, a global leader in engineering, robotics, and culture. But none of this was inevitable. Japan is a chain of mountainous islands with limited natural resources, constantly threatened by earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and tsunamis. For centuries, it remained isolated from much of the world, ruled by warriors instead of kings and shaped by traditions unlike anywhere else on Earth. Yet time and again, Japan did what many nations could not. It survived devastating civil wars, resisted foreign domination, transformed itself into a modern industrial power, endured the destruction of World War II, and rebuilt into one of the most influential countries on the planet. Its story isn't simply one of survival. It's a story of reinvention. Again and again, when history forced Japan to change, it found a way to adapt without losing its identity. How did a land once ruled by samurai become a nation famous for high-speed trains, advanced technology, and global innovation? To answer that, we have to travel back thousands of years, to a time when these islands were home to scattered communities that had no idea they were laying the foundations of one of history's most remarkable civilizations. Long before there were emperors, samurai, or great castles, Japan was a land of small communities scattered across its islands. For thousands of years, the earliest inhabitants lived by hunting, fishing, and gathering. They built simple homes, crafted intricate pottery, and developed a deep respect for the natural world, a relationship that would remain at the heart of Japanese culture for centuries. Then, everything began to change. Around the first millennium BC, new migrants arrived from the Asian mainland, bringing with them rice farming, metal tools, and new technologies. These innovations transformed society. Villages grew larger, food became more reliable, and powerful local leaders emerged. As wealth increased, so did competition. Clans fought for land, resources, and influence, each seeking to expand its authority. Over time, one clan gradually rose above the others, the Yamato clan. Through alliances, military strength, and political skill, it unified much of Japan under a single ruler, laying the foundation for what would become the imperial dynasty. The emperor became the symbolic heart of the nation, but maintaining control over a growing country was never easy. Powerful regional families gained influence, and the balance of power slowly began to shift away from the imperial court. A new kind of leader was about to emerge. Not a politician, not an emperor, but a warrior. And that warrior would change Japan forever. As the emperor's influence weakened, powerful regional clans began taking control of their own lands. To protect their territories, they relied on highly trained warriors who lived by discipline, loyalty, and martial skill. These warriors became known as the samurai. At first, they served noble families. But as conflicts between rival clans grew more frequent, the samurai became far more than bodyguards. They evolved into professional soldiers, military commanders, and political leaders whose power often exceeded that of the imperial court itself. By the late 12th century, the balance of power had changed dramatically. After years of conflict, the Minamoto clan emerged victorious in the Genpei War. In 1192, Minamoto no Yoritomo was appointed Japan's first shogun, establishing a military government that ruled in the emperor's name. Although the emperor remained an important symbol, Real authority now rested with the shogun and the samurai. This new system would shape Japan for centuries. The samurai followed a strict code of honor that later became known as Bushido, valuing loyalty, courage, discipline, and self-sacrifice. Their influence reached beyond the battlefield, shaping Japanese politics, culture, and society in profound ways. For generations, the samurai stood at the center of Japanese life. But peace was fragile. As ambitious warlords sought greater power, rival clans once again turned their swords against one another, plunging the country into one of the most violent periods in its history. Who would emerge from the chaos to unite Japan once and for all? By the 15th century, Japan was no longer united. The authority of the shogun had weakened, and powerful regional lords, known as daimyo, began fighting for control. One by one, old alliances collapsed. Castles rose across the countryside, armies marched almost constantly, and battles became a part of everyday life. This era became known as the Sengoku period, the age of warring states. For nearly 150 years, Japan was consumed by civil war. Every daimyo dreamed of becoming the one ruler who could unite the nation. Some relied on diplomacy, others on betrayal, and many on overwhelming military force. Victories were often short-lived, as today's ally could become tomorrow's enemy. Yet this chaos also transformed Japan. Military tactics evolved rapidly. Castles became larger and more sophisticated. When Portuguese traders arrived in the 16th century, they introduced firearms, forever changing the way wars were fought. Ambitious warlords quickly recognized their potential, adapting faster than many of their rivals. But despite countless battles, no one could secure lasting victory. Japan remained divided, exhausted by generations of conflict. Then, one extraordinary leader began accomplishing what many believed was impossible. He didn't just win battles. He began uniting an entire nation. And before long, two more remarkable leaders would finish what he started, bringing an end to centuries of war and changing Japan forever. Japan's long age of civil war did not end because of one man. It ended because of three. The first was Oda Nobunaga, a bold and unconventional warlord who believed old traditions were standing in the way of progress. He embraced firearms, rewarded talent over family background, and defeated rivals with strategies that shocked his enemies. One victory after another brought much of central Japan under his control. But before he could finish unifying the country, Nobunaga was betrayed by one of his own generals and forced to take his own life in 1582. His dream did not die with him. It was carried forward by Toyotomi Hideyoshi, a man born into a humble farming family who rose through ability rather than noble birth. Hideyoshi completed the unification of Japan through a combination of military victories, diplomacy, and political reform. For the first time in generations, most of the country answered to a single ruler. Yet peace remained fragile. After Hideyoshi's death, powerful lords once again prepared for war. The final struggle came in 1600 at the Battle of Sekigahara, where Tokugawa Ieyasu achieved a decisive victory. 3 years later, he became shogun, establishing the Tokugawa shogunate that would rule Japan for more than 250 years. At last, the endless wars were over. The samurai still existed, but their role was about to change dramatically. Instead of spending their lives on the battlefield, they would now serve a nation entering one of the longest periods of peace in its history. But maintaining peace required an extraordinary decision. Japan would close its doors to much of the outside world. After centuries of war, the Tokugawa shoguns understood one thing above all else. Peace could be lost as quickly as it had been won. To preserve stability, they imposed strict control over the country. The daimyo were carefully monitored, the samurai were transformed from warriors into administrators, and society was organized into rigid social classes. For the first time in generations, Japan experienced lasting peace. But another threat was growing. European traders and Christian missionaries had begun arriving in Japan, bringing not only new goods and ideas but also foreign influence. Watching European powers establish colonies across Asia, the Tokugawa shogunate feared that Japan could become the next target. Their response was extraordinary. Beginning in the 1630s, Japan adopted a policy of isolation known as sakoku. Most foreign trade was banned, Japanese citizens were forbidden from leaving the country, and only limited commerce was allowed through carefully controlled ports. For more than 2 centuries, Japan remained largely closed to the outside world. While Europe entered the Age of Enlightenment and the Industrial Revolution, Japan developed along its own path. Its cities flourished, art such as kabuki theater and ukiyo-e woodblock prints thrived, and a unique culture matured in relative peace. The policy succeeded in preserving stability. But it came with a hidden cost. As the rest of the world advanced rapidly in technology and military power, Japan remained largely unaware of how dramatically the balance of power had changed. Then, one summer day in 1853, dark ships appeared on the horizon, and centuries of isolation came to an abrupt end. On a summer morning in 1853, the people of Japan saw something they had never witnessed before. Large black steam-powered warships appeared off the coast, belching smoke into the sky. They became known simply as the Black Ships. Commanding them was Commodore Matthew Perry of the United States. He carried a clear message: Japan must open its ports to American trade. For more than 200 years, the Tokugawa shogunate had kept foreign powers at a distance. But now, it faced a painful reality. Japan's traditional military was no match for the modern weapons carried by the Western powers. The shogunate faced an impossible choice: resist and risk a devastating war, or open the country and abandon centuries of isolation. Reluctantly, Japan chose to open its doors. The decision shook the nation. Many believed the shogunate had failed to protect Japan, and confidence in its rule quickly collapsed. Political unrest spread, and before long, the Tokugawa government came to an end. In 1868, power was officially restored to the emperor in what became known as the Meiji Restoration. But restoring the emperor was only the beginning. Japan's new leaders understood that if their nation did not modernize, it could suffer the same fate as many countries that had fallen under Western control. They made a bold choice. Instead of resisting change, they would embrace it faster than anyone thought possible. And in just a few decades, Japan would transform from a feudal society ruled by samurai into one of the world's fastest-growing industrial powers. The leaders of the Meiji Restoration knew that Japan had little time. Across Asia, powerful Western empires were expanding their influence. Countries that failed to modernize risked losing their independence. Japan was determined not to become one of them. The transformation was astonishing. Feudal domains were abolished, a modern government was established, and a national education system was created. Railways stretched across the country, factories rose where rice fields had once stood, and shipyards began producing modern naval vessels. The samurai class, which had ruled Japan for centuries, lost its privileged status as the nation built a modern conscript army. The changes were painful. Ancient traditions gave way to new technologies. Some welcomed the reforms, while others resisted them. But Japan's leaders remained committed to one goal: building a nation strong enough to stand alongside the world's greatest powers. The results came faster than anyone expected. Within a few decades, Japan defeated China in the First Sino-Japanese War and stunned the world by defeating the Russian Empire in the Russo-Japanese War. For the first time in modern history, an Asian nation had defeated a major European power. Japan had achieved what once seemed impossible. It was no longer a nation struggling to survive. It had become an empire. But with growing power came growing ambition. And that ambition would eventually draw Japan into the largest and most devastating conflict the world had ever seen. By the early 20th century, Japan had become one of the world's leading military powers. Its industries were expanding, its navy ranked among the strongest on Earth, and its leaders believed that securing more land and resources was essential for the nation's future. Expansion across Asia accelerated, bringing Japan into conflict with neighboring countries and, eventually, with the world's most powerful nations. The turning point came in 1941. Japan launched a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, hoping to weaken the United States before it could intervene in the Pacific. Instead, the attack drew America fully into World War II, transforming a regional conflict into a massive struggle across the Pacific. At first, Japan advanced rapidly. But the tide soon turned. After major battles such as Midway, Japan's navy suffered devastating losses. Allied forces steadily pushed closer to the Japanese mainland, and relentless bombing campaigns destroyed cities and industries. Then came August 1945. The cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were devastated by atomic bombs, bringing unimaginable destruction. Facing defeat and further loss of life, Japan announced its surrender, bringing World War II to an end. The empire that had risen so quickly now lay in ruins. Its cities were shattered. Its economy had collapsed. Many wondered whether Japan would ever recover. Yet from the ashes of defeat, the nation was about to achieve one of the most remarkable recoveries in modern history. In 1945, Japan faced its darkest moment. Much of the country had been devastated by war. Cities lay in ruins, millions of people struggled to rebuild their lives, and the empire that had once stretched across Asia was gone. For many observers, Japan's future looked uncertain. But instead of rebuilding through military power, Japan chose a different path. A new constitution renounced war as a means of settling international disputes. The country focused on education, technology, manufacturing, and economic growth. Factories reopened, businesses embraced innovation, and a new generation set out to rebuild the nation from the ground up. The transformation was extraordinary. Within just a few decades, Japan became one of the world's fastest-growing economies. Companies such as Toyota, Sony, Honda, Panasonic, and Nintendo introduced products that reached homes across the globe. Japanese engineering, electronics, and automobiles became symbols of quality and innovation. The world had once feared Japan's military strength. Now it admired Japan's technological leadership. Today, Japan continues to balance ancient traditions with modern innovation. Shinto shrines stand beside skyscrapers. Bullet trains race past centuries-old temples. Samurai castles remain as reminders of a distant past, while robots and advanced technology point toward the future. Japan's story is one of remarkable resilience. Again and again, it faced challenges that could have ended its history. Instead, it adapted, rebuilt, and reinvented itself. Perhaps that is Japan's greatest achievement. Not that it became a modern giant, but that through every era of change, it never lost the spirit that made it uniquely Japan. Japan entered the 21st century as one of the world's most influential nations. Its technology helped shape everyday life across the globe. From automobiles and high-speed rail to robotics, gaming, animation, and consumer electronics, Japan became known not only for what it produced, but for the precision and quality behind it. Yet success brought new challenges. After decades of rapid growth, the economy slowed. An aging population and declining birth rate created pressures unlike any the country had faced before. Natural disasters, including powerful earthquakes and tsunamis, served as constant reminders that life on these islands has never been predictable. Still, Japan responded the way it always had. With resilience. Cities were rebuilt. Infrastructure improved. Innovation continued. Even as the world changed, Japan remained a leader in engineering, manufacturing, scientific research, and cultural influence. What makes Japan remarkable isn't simply its technology. It's the balance. Ancient temples stand beside glass skyscrapers. Traditional tea ceremonies continue in a nation connected by some of the fastest trains on Earth. Festivals that began centuries ago are celebrated in cities filled with robots and digital billboards. Few countries have embraced the future so completely while preserving so much of their past. And perhaps that is the secret behind Japan's extraordinary journey. After thousands of years of change, conquest, isolation, modernization, and recovery, what has allowed Japan to remain unmistakably Japan? Japan's story cannot be measured only by the empires it built, the wars it fought, or the technologies it created. Its greatest achievement is something far more enduring. For thousands of years, this island nation has faced challenges that could have changed its identity forever. Civil wars divided it. Foreign powers forced it to open its borders. World War II left much of the country in ruins. Earthquakes, tsunamis, and economic crises tested its resilience time and again. Yet each time, Japan adapted. Not by abandoning its past, but by building upon it. The samurai disappeared, but their values of discipline, honor, and perseverance continued to influence Japanese society. Ancient shrines still stand beside towering skyscrapers. Centuries-old traditions continue in one of the world's most technologically advanced nations. That balance between tradition and innovation has become Japan's greatest strength. It is why a country with limited natural resources became a global leader in engineering, manufacturing, culture, and design. It is why millions of people travel there each year, not only to see the future, but to experience a past that still lives in the present. History often remembers nations for a single era. Japan is different. It is remembered for continually reinventing itself. From scattered island communities to the age of the samurai. From centuries of isolation to global influence. From the devastation of war to becoming a modern giant. Japan's journey is proof that true strength is not found in resisting change, but in embracing it without forgetting who you are. Because empires rise and fall. Technology evolves. The world never stops changing. But a nation that preserves its identity while adapting to the future can inspire generations for centuries to come.